Welcome to Art with Ian. Today we're talking about environment design. That's coming up next. All right, welcome to episode 3 of the environment design series. Today we are talking about references. And you may have heard some people say using references are cheating and silly things like that, which is just not true. Now, if you don't know how to use a reference properly, you could potentially see one type of using a reference as cheating, where you take that reference and you trace over it. That's tracing. That's not using a reference the way that professionals use references. The way that we use references is pulling inspiration from the real world so that our designs can look more believable. So it's when you use a reference, when someone says to use a reference, it's not really, they're not saying go get a picture off the internet and trace over the top of it and call yourself, a designer or an artist or whatever. I mean, that's great. I mean, and there's nothing even wrong with that if you're just trying to learn, if you're doing it as a very specific study and you're taking notes about, oh, why were these shapes the way they are, and that kind of thing. But that's going off in a whole other direction. Either way, the point is it's okay to use references. So let's go ahead and talk a bit about why we use references. So it helps us build our visual library, which will have a huge impact on how we design future work. This is a big one. So when you're every time you look at a reference, every time you use a reference, you should be actively trying to store that in your memory. But even if you're not trying, it will go into your brain, and it'll build your visual library. And then the next time you design, you'll have less dependency on that reference in the design phase. So yeah, you probably will still want to look at a reference when you're going to your final render to help you really pull that real world feeling into your work, depending on what kind of a finish you're going for. But your designing will be more believable even in the sketching phase. As you build your visual library, you'll have more confidence when you design too, because have more to pull from. It inspires our designs and allows us to see the world as it is rather than how we perceive it in our minds. So you've probably had the experience where you get this crazy awesome image in your head, and then you go to try and draw it or whatever, and slowly but surely you realize how far away from anything real your thought was, your idea was. It's almost like you're seeing maybe 4 or 5 different shots of the same scene, and then somehow mashing them together, and you're not really sure what the textures are. It's all very vague, even for the most visual people, which I'm a very visual person. When I think of stuff in my head, I see pretty vivid images, but they barely ever translate all the way to the finished painting. I need to look at reference, if I want to bring some real gravitas to my work and have it feel grounded in reality. No matter how far pushed, no matter how sci-fi or fantasy world you get, you want the viewer to feel an attachment to it. And the only way to do that is to pull from the real world, the world they know. So if you look at Star Wars, all the worlds they go to, they feel like places on our planet. And there's a reason for that, So, and then lastly, it adds a layer of believability to our work that can be hard to achieve otherwise, which is kind of reiterating everything I've been saying. It's just really helpful if you want to bring your image up to a certain believability and standard, and you're going semi-realism and that kind of a thing. It's just really important to get your references going. So let's look at some references for specifically the landscape that I would like to accomplish. So when I think fantasy, I go straight to New Zealand. So I didn't even look for pictures of other places besides New Zealand, because New Zealand is insane. So what I've done here is I've gotten certain images for certain reasons. This first one has kind of has the overall what I'm probably looking for in my majority of my color palette kind of a thing. But it doesn't really have those distant mountains that I want behind my cliff. This one here does have the mountains, but it doesn't really have that front color palette. So these two are kind of probably going to be my main go-to. Like, this is going to be my front area, kind of right in here, where I've got the cliff with the gate in it. And then this is going to be kind of for my distant stuff. And then these two are just mood. Just to kind of get my head around different moods that I might be able to bring into the image. Like, what kind of lighting do I want to use? There's this very, very early morning light. I think this is probably dawn. And then this looks like evening light to me. So, and they're both really great just to help me kind of, if I want to push mood in daytime, I kind of have an idea in my head about what time of day I want. If we look over here at this really quick. So if you look right here, this area right here, this is jutting out. This is kind of growing out of the cliff right here. And so if I have the sunlight up here somewhere coming down, right, then I can cast a shadow across here. And depending on where I put it, if I put it like here, I can cast the shadow like this, right? And if I cast a shadow here across my gate, I can push my highest contrast in the image right here. I can get this really nice sense of light cascading down into here, and then this cool shadow thing happening, right? And so that's pretty much what I want. It's just going to be a matter of getting the palette to look right and getting it all working and whatnot. And then and yeah, so basically so it's going to be a matter of how far out do I want this to look like it's coming out, and where does the light get past it again, and then hit down in here somewhere, probably onto this, maybe onto the top of this waterfall. I'll want that getting hit with water, or I mean with light, excuse me, just to get a gleam happening there so I can really sell that that's water right there. So there's that. Let's go back to our reference sheet. So that's basically how I'm going to get my environment going. Looking at these, this is what I'm going to pull my inspiration from. And how cool is it that this one actually has a guy in the shot to help me feel out my scale. If you recall, there's a person in my shot. And so, you know, that's really nice to have that bit of, you know, this is really how big this place is. It's huge, you know, so that's great. All right, so then now that we have our environment kind of locked on, how we want that to feel, I went ahead and got into the architecture side of it. So looking at architecture that's actually carved into cliff faces, which mine is, I don't know that mine is exactly carved in. I think it's a little bit more like built in than that, but this is a good way to start seeing, you know, just like the more primitive, like just carved straight in kind of way, and it's super cool. Let's zoom in a little bit and look at this, because this is, if I wanted to add some sense of design, like a design sense beyond just the architecture, like something that tells a little bit more of the story of the group of people who live, the species that live in this mountain castle, cliffside castle. This kind of helps me get my head in a space like people do this kind of stuff, you know. They express themselves in, you know, I mean, what are we doing? We're talking about art, right? So, you know, to just not just think of it as like what's the architectural need, but how can I spice it up? If once I get all that working, the base stuff working, maybe it would be cool to get in and try and do a little bit of something like that that tells a little more of the story of these people. A little bit more cliffside architecture, which is super epic. Like, this is just crazy cool. Some of the things that humans have accomplished architecturally astound me. This is amazing. This is outrageous. The shape language here, if you see right here, this shape language, you know, these arches, this is architecturally sound for like bridges and things. It's actually, it bears load really well. Things like that. So this is, it's not just, it doesn't just look good, it's actually architecturally very sound. So that was a cool one to look at. Also just scale and grandeur, you know, I'm just getting my head around the feeling of scale and grandeur. Let's come over here. This one I grabbed for a couple of reasons. One, this gate, right? The gate here, and then just in general, if you look right here, this whole section, if you cut that out and slap it onto mine, it's got a very, that feeling, it's got kind of all of the elements that I want, right? You've got like maybe little bits of trim over the main gate area and then some other stuff and other ideas happening. So that was a really good reference for that, just the gate specifically. This one, again, these kinds of details, where you've got 1, 2, 3, kind of, that the stack of detail that happens, and also this, it's kind of in shadow, but I can still see it. This whole right here, this area right in here, framing in that, and they've got a couple windows, so like that's pretty good for my gate as well. And then again, more gate. If you just pull this out, right? If you just pull this out right here, it's got a very, like, this is good for my main gate area for, seeing like what kind of repeating details do they use, that kind of thing. So I got that. And then just a couple little waterfall refs for my waterfall. This one's really good. It's actually man-made, which mine is too in my shot. If you look here, if we zoom in, you can see that this is actually built, right? They built this over this waterfall. So I have to decide if, like, was the waterfall there, or did they do it to make a grand entrance to their place, which is kind of what in my head I had, and that's why it looks kind of a little more contrived. There's not very natural looking, the way that it's set up here. So that's a good reference, kind of just seeing how, and I saw something like this in my head, the idea of building over the top and having the water come out from somewhere underneath the platform. But then I also grabbed a little bit of a natural reference too, something still wide and short like mine is. But I don't think it's going to get, like, I don't think that the waterfall is going to be all, super crazy like this, where it's, jutting over a bunch of undulations and weird things in the landscape. I think it's going to be very smooth, clean water kind of coming over. So, anyways, so those are the references I gathered. I don't think I need any more, and that brings me to kind of one of the last points about references that I want to make here, is that you have to know when to stop with this. So it's great to gather reference, but if you go crazy with this, it can become an excuse not to get to work. And so it's like, I'm going to get started on my painting, but I need to get my references. And then next thing you know, you spend 3 hours pulling like 100 references off the internet, and you will never use that many references. If you do, your painting is going to be a hodgepodge of ideas, because that's not cohesive anymore. You have to know when to stop. You have to know what you really need to push your design, because at the end of the day, it still has to be your design. You're just trying to build. You're trying to build your design up with the real world. What have people done before? How can I make this fantasy world I'm creating feel tangible? And what have people in the real world done that's super cool and super relatable to what I'm trying to design? So that's pretty much what you have to ask yourself, and you have to tell yourself when it's time to stop. You have to know when it's time to stop. And for me personally, 2 sheets, so this sheet and this sheet, any more than that is starting to feel like now you're just browsing the internet for cool pictures and not actually getting to work. So keep that in mind when you're getting your references together. And that's pretty much going to wrap up this video. It's a little bit of a shorter one. Or not tomorrow, next week, next Thursday, we're going to actually start painting. So we're going to be laying in our values. Really looking forward to getting into that. So make sure you subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next video. Give this one a like. Comment if you have anything to say about references, or if you have a great spot you like to get your references or anything like that. And I will see you guys in the next one. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, share it with your friends, ring the bell for notifications of future videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.